This conference will now be recorded.
Right, but there's stuff now, the drivers just have to hit the ride.
All right, yeah, they're starting recording.
Okay, all right, sorry.
Now that the food's here, meeting. Thank you all for coming. First off, I'll just do a quick round of introductions on our staff here, and then tell us who you all are. My name is Brad Harris. I'm the Transportation Project Director with the Montezuma Regional Planning Commission.
Brian Doherty, Principal Transportation Planner, RTP.
Just going around first. Okay, I'm Chelsea. I'm with the Chinna 9, which is the Health Equity Partnership for North Central Mass.
Bruno Fisher. I'm the administrator from the Montezuma Regional Transit Authority here in Pittsburgh.
I'm Scott Rich. I'm the assistant administrator. Same. So.
Representing the Selectman Stroh.
And I'm Bonnie Mahoney. I am the grants and procurement
As you heard, we're recording this meeting, and what we plan on doing is posting it to a transportation plan website that we have. We'll be soon on our MRPC website. You'll be able to go there and take a look at this recording. There'll also be a place to go to find information on where we stand in the RTP. We'll be posting information here on upcoming meetings, where we stand, draft documents, and so on. So we'll show you that in a little bit. Hopefully we'll get that up within the next few weeks. If when you have a question, if you just identify yourself for the recording, so we can make sure everybody knows who's asking what. This is just going to be one of probably several other meetings we'll have throughout the entire regional transportation plan process. So we'll be sending out notices hopefully beforehand, so we'll keep you aware of what's going on. We want to be able to get as much public input as possible. It's a major concept, major part of the entire transportation plan process, so we plan to have more. Our target for endorsement of the plan is approximately June of 2023. And before that, there'll be a 21-day public review and comment period, so we'll have to have a draft done by May timeframe. We have a schedule we'll show you in a little bit to give you an idea. That's it just for introductions. Next slide, Brian.
With this present.
Making me do all the work too, huh? Where are we going? Stop
You
it.
can just scroll down.
Okay. First, a little bit about the MRPC. We represent 22 communities, 3 cities, 19 towns in the Devens planning area. Northern Worcester County and Middlesex County is our jurisdiction. And according to the 2020 census, we have 242,671 individuals in our region, covering approximately 685 square miles. The MRPC, though, is not a federal, state, or county agency, but rather a regional agency created by and responsible to its member communities. It was created through legislation by the state a number of years ago. Currently, the MRPC has about 11 full-time professional planners on board and 4 departments: economic development, community development, geographic information systems, transit planning, and transportation planning. This is just a map giving you an idea of our planning area, which is similar to Mark's. But this is the area we cover all 22 communities out to Athol on the west, Bear to the east. One way. Okay. Who's involved in transportation planning? There's 3 major groups involved. One's the Montezuma Regional Planning Commission. The second is the Montezuma Joint Transportation Committee, which is a subcommittee of the MRPC, advisory in nature, provides feedback and recommendations to the MPO and to the Montezuma Regional Planning Commission. Then we have the Montezuma Metropolitan Planning Organization. And they're responsible for the formal development and endorsement of federally required documents such as the TIP, Transportation Improvement Program, Unified Planning Work Program, and the Regional Transportation Plan. There's also some other required documents that come along throughout the year that the MPO is responsible for. The MRPC works as staff to the MPO, and that's how our role in this. We get funding from Mass DOT and federal Highway Administration, and Federal Transit Administration to provide transportation planning for all our member communities. And you can see this is the membership of the MPO consists of 10 signatories, Secretary of the Executive Office of Mass DOT, the Administrator of the Highway Division of Mass DOT, Chairman of the MRPC, Chairman of the Montezuma Regional Transit Authority, the mayors of Fitchburg, Leominster, and Gardner, and 4 representatives from the subregions of rural communities. We divided up our 19 communities into 4 subregions based around the same approximate census population. In regards to the transportation plan, what the plan does, basically it provides guidance to our local and state officials deciding how and where to spend federal and state transportation dollars. It is not, though, a wish list, but a plan with identified and recommended projects that have a reasonable chance of being funded and developed. Why this plan matters? Well, basically it outlines the transportation priority needs for the region, and if a community wants to receive federal funds for a project, whether it's highway, roads, or bridges, it must fit into the policy goals of the regional transportation plan. That's probably the most important part of the RTP. Project that goes out for construction and bid basically works through the process of being identified in the RTP. The community then works to submit a project request to Mass DOT. It gets approved by Mass DOT and then works its way to the TIP, which is a 5-year document, and finally out to advertisement and construction. What the plan covers, basically all the various modes of transportation, from roads and rail to tonight's coverage. Tonight's focus is on transit. And also includes air quality sections and fiscal constraint requirements. The document needs to be fiscally constrained. We're provided with funding estimates from Mass DOT for the life of the document, about 25-year life. And then we develop the projects and to ensure that we don't exceed those numbers, so it's a fiscally constrained document. That's a federal requirement we have to adhere to. The current regional transportation plan, which was developed in 2020, actually 2019, was adopted in summer of 2019. It's called the 2020 Regional Transportation Plan. It's available online. Let's quickly try and show you. If I do this,
You could probably go to the go-to meeting on the left there and just type in at mrpc.org.
Did you do it already?
You could probably just go from
One of the
there.
other tabs,
Yeah, there you go. Our website, mrpc.org.
And it's the front page of our website. And if you scroll down on the left-hand side, you'll see this white banner. And this is, again, the 2020 Regional Transportation Plan. When we have information on the new one, there'll be a banner right here that'll take you to it also. But if you want to see what's in the prior plan, click there. It'll take you to this. Each individual chapter is available for download. You can download the entire document if you want. It's a fairly large and cumbersome document, about 50 megabytes. And there's also what's called a map journal on here, which presents the same information just online and eventually. There we go. It's a more visual way of seeing the transportation plan and what's incorporated. And as you scroll through here, these are the different sections you can jump right to. But as you scroll through, the information over here will change with the various sections you're on. And you can see all the information in the plan. Jump back through here. And you can also just jump to a section such as, let's just say, safety. You can jump right to the sections on safety and get information there. So as I said, we will be posting the new plan on the same website, and it'll have the same type of information, and you'll be able to then see where we stand in the process. And there will be a banner right here, so you'll be able to just quickly access it. Back to
By the PowerPoint.
Okay. Now, the basic reason we're here tonight is, not that again, is we want to hear from everybody. The public outreach and feedback is an important concept and very important part of the overall plan development. We asked that we have developed an online survey. There's also paper copies available. But if you want to take the survey, you can use this link or scan the QR code. We're also making copies available at various locations in our communities, CD centers, libraries, and so forth. So the paper copy can be left there. If you want copies of the survey yourself, go back to our website, and under announcements, there'll be a link to the entire survey. Right here, you'll see this one for taking our outreach survey. If you just click there, you'll get to see you'll be able to download a copy of the survey, and you can also link to SurveyMonkey online survey too. We also ask if you know of anybody you think who might be interested in filling out the survey to point them in this direction, encourage them to fill it out, encourage any group or activity that you know might have an interest in transportation plan to fill out, because what we get back from those surveys will help us develop the transportation planning scenarios we use to develop the entire plan.
Is there a goal? Sorry, Chelsea from Channel 9. Is there a goal for survey collection? And how many do you usually end up with?
I forgot how much you got last time, but we're going to leave it open till about end of January at least. So.
I brought some. Well, I brought the actual paper survey and then the QR code and everything.
I think I remember we got over 200 survey responses last time. I believe we also had another few different things that we did in 2019 before all this.
Yep.
And if you know of a group that you think might be interested, if you just give them our name, we'll be willing to go out and talk to them and provide them with copies of the survey. So any group or any organization particularly interested in special needs populations, elderly, disabled, limited English language people, anything like that, we're willing to not only meet with them, but provide them with copies of the survey.
Do you have the survey translated in?
Spanish? Not yet, no.
We're working with MassDOT to get the funding for that. We don't have a contract with a translation service provider yet, which would be super helpful if we had somebody. How long is it? Not super long. It's like they're all like similar. It's all like it's kind of based around COVID, like what your travel patterns were like pre-COVID, and then post-COVID, if they've changed, if you're working from home, or if you're, so it's kind of more about what, and then what your priorities are for transportation and your needs.
And that's what the next part of the presentation, we will look at some questions that will kind of mirror the survey, so that you know what we're looking for. And obviously the following are just going to be these other questions, but we don't expect, projects and information right now, but something to think about to go home and just, throw about. Send us any information at any time, either through email or phone calls or through the surveys. But we just want to kickstart your thought process in what you deem and what you think about the transportation network in the region. So now we'll go to the first set of questions. Good. Maybe get this right. And I'll turn it over to Brian.
And like Brad mentioned, the plan is ongoing. It's hopefully endorsed by June. We'll really get into the meat of the analysis in the next few months. The surveys we want to leave open for at least through the end of January, and we're still looking for some more outreach opportunities as well, including translation services. We have just talked. We met with DOT last week, and that's really things that we can talk about specifically the survey, and also with translation services. So the document itself will be translated.
That reminds me too, we did meet with Mass DOT. Mass DOT is in the process of developing a statewide long-range transportation plan. And they are willing to, they have something called a meeting in a box, like a canned presentation related to the statewide transportation plan. If anyone is interested in hearing from the state, just let us know. We can coordinate with them and they could come out and do something for you, or we could provide the presentation to you as part of our work. But we want to coordinate the plans together and use each other for public input and feedback. So if you do have any interest in that, let us know. We'll rearrange it with Mass DOT.
So I think the idea is to, especially because it's a small group and everyone's familiar with the process here and what the RTP is about and everything, just a discussion to try to gain some feedback. What are the main transit-related challenges in your community or agency or what have you? And I know there's probably, a lot to go over, but what comes to mind with the main transit-related challenges?
And this kind of relates to the first, one of the main questions in the survey, which has, next slide.
I believe that's version.
Well, unfortunately, it's not up there. But we do have on the survey a list of different options or different issues, and we asked people to rank them from 1 to 10. They range from road maintenance, transit options, congestion, bicycle and pedestrian accessibility, safety, economic development, residential development, climate change and environment, changing demographics, and improved town center. Those are the issues we developed. We asked them to rank it from 1 to 10, number of importance, 1 being the most important to 10 the least important. And as we did last time, we took those responses and we were able to develop a series of planning policies where we said, overall for the region, congestion relief was the top priority. So that helps us define project development and say that we want to promote more projects that would lead to congestion relief. Or if it was transit options, we want to promote more projects faster for transit-related issues. And that's what we plan on doing here. I believe the last RTP, it was safety ranked up top, along with, I think it was bicycle pedestrian accessibility. So those are the types of projects that we would like to try to promote within the RTP. And we're going to take the last few years, go back and look at the TIP, the projects that have been advertised and built, and see how they've met those goals that we set in the RTP.
So this is specifically a transit meeting, and we had a number of meetings. We had 4 meetings with each of our subregions a few weeks ago, and one of the issues that came up from a lot of the smaller towns was, and I'm sure Art hears this all the time, is just access specifically for seniors.
I have my name is Scott Rich, if you want me to mention my name for the video. I have a master's in gerontology from UMass Boston, and our communities, as Mr. Matthew is keenly aware too, working with the Sterling Council on Aging, we have communities that have the population that's like 35% over 60 years old, and seniors lose the ability to drive on average for men for 7 years and women for 10. And there's this population that they may have 1 van or 2 vans to help their seniors, but they give unique the same riders, like 50 of them or so in a town. They're the same people that use the vans all the time. So there's huge problems with isolation and loneliness for what happens when the rest of the people can't get rides. And it's just going to be an age wave issue that's going to keep happening. That's inevitable because 10,000 baby boomers turn 65 in the United States a day. And people are living longer, and the fact that the issues that become the frailties of aging, they lose the ability to drive. This is going to be something that's like a perfect mix of needing more and more help that's not present in our society at all right now. And we did a meeting too at Bruno and I at the Gardner City Hall, where Senator Goby's office about a month ago. And we talked about the need to help people in rural transportation situations. And we did that in partnership with Mass Rehabilitation. And they showed clearly from their data, they had 522 people that wanted to go to work. But because they lived in rural areas, they couldn't get rides to go to work. And most of these people were disabled. But because of the $2 a mile fixed route policies that exist for accessing our fixed bus lines, they couldn't get there even though they're certified as being disabled. So there's like this missing link of getting people who are in that situation to access public transportation because of the rules prevent them from using it. And so many of the communities that you showed earlier on your map are exactly in that situation that are denied access to public transportation, and that has to be fixed.
That rule you talked about, is that a federal?
Yes.
Which one?
The ADA rule, the fixed
Yeah, it's a 3/4 mile use out of a fixed route.
Some of the towns that we have here or cities do pay for the entire towns, like Leominster, Fitchburg, and Gardner to get rides, but that's the town itself doing that to get them. So, but the majority of the 24 communities that we work with do not have access to those rides like that.
The 3/4 mile is the minimum requirement. So that's if you have fixed route service in a community, you must provide ADA within 3/4 of a circumference around that fixed route. So, but to go beyond those borders obviously costs more money, and usually it's the smaller communities that stick to the 3/4 because that's all the assessment.
And as you saw before, I mean, a lot of our communities fall right within that range, and a lot of the same communities that Mart has as well. And we've all seen those age cohort groups and how they're projected to be, and how they've increased now and how they are going to be 20, 30 years, 10 years in the future. So this problem is certainly we would anticipate.
It's inevitable that this age wave is going to continue, and if we don't prepare for it, it's going to be like a tsunami instead of something we can deal with.
In a region like this, clearly it's not a large metropolitan area like Boston, and some of these communities with under 15,000, 10,000 people there. It's a very common issue.
It's an economic development issue too for our smaller towns.
Yes.
I mean, as much as there's people who are aging and need to get around for that reason, there's also people who can't or won't move to the area because there's no transit for them to get to and from the places that they need to go. So in terms of being able to get to work, get to grocery stores and daily living, and it's impossible to provide fixed route service to 27 cities and towns. So there needs to be flexible, different options. And there's a lot of people who don't need service all the time, right? There's people who need service because they're temporarily disabled, or somebody who has, a car breaks down and now they're down to one car in the family for a fixed period of time. And there's all kinds of reasons why, they couldn't get a ride for this particular shift, people who can't pick up shifts. We have specific industries that are really hurting for workers right now, and the fact that they can't get transit to and from on shift work is really impacting that.
And then there's the consequences of isolation and loneliness from a health perspective. That's tremendous. The cost to the United States is trillions of dollars a year, and it's like looking at this from a standpoint of like the forest for the trees. Like if we spend pennies on the dollar to provide transportation for people, there'd be massive declines in costs of like Medicaid and Medicare costs and things that people just have to our healthcare system, because they'd be able to get healthcare they need, to be able to get prescriptions, to be able to get food, to be able to engage in issues, things like institutionalization, which would be all these things cumulatively. You have dependency issues, addiction issues. All this stuff grows when you don't have access to rides, and so that is something really we need to think about to get ahead of the curve and deal with that, because that will easily pay for itself if it's just dealt with from the resource of transportation.
As a transit agency, I'm assuming the most you hear about is the need for medical transportation. Appointments.
Well, that's probably secondary now to workforce.
Workforce.
Yeah, I mean, we've been dealing a lot with, I mean, probation has come a lot. We've got a lot of probation officers that are coming to us with people that are coming out of incarceration, and they find them jobs and then can't get them into the job. And so we've actually been connecting with all three chambers, the North Quabbin, the North Central, and then the Neshoba Valley. Working with them, we've been working with Mass Hire, and we really, I think we're going to try to get, and they just released a study, the chamber did, that was done, I think, by UMass,
The transportation
McCormick School, and I think they're, it's kind of, it's a really elaborate workforce study. And a lot of it talks around, getting transportation kind of in the mix because, there's so much training money right now. It's almost obscene, good for them though. I'm glad they've got it. But now they're saying a lot of it is, they're getting the training and you're getting job placements and you can't get into the job. So that's probably, I think, those two things are probably the top. I mean, medical, but definitely workforce is becoming almost equally as, they can find the workers, but then the workers can't get to work. So
And to the education itself.
Yeah, right.
We don't have.
But in the first place, the training in the first place, right? Yeah.
Yeah, we're also starting a large project for the Devens area. We're working with Mass Development and the Devens Economic Commission to help provide rides. We've met with about 15 companies already in there, and we'll be beginning ride services to get people from the communities where they live to work and then back. So that should be a good thing that's going to help those businesses get up and running, because that recruiting is so difficult right now to get new people to companies.
Is the biggest obstacle just lack of funding, or is there anything else out there?
Mainly funding, but equally as difficult nowadays is their own workforce.
Yes.
So as probably you're aware, the transit authorities don't operate. They're not merit employees. We all have operating companies that are that operate our services. That's really the T. So the T has, other than Keolis and whatnot, is mainly the MBT operators versus us, where we have operating companies. And the difficulty with them getting new drivers is we're lucky we had a pretty big wave of bus driver retirements pre-COVID. And so the newer ones in are younger and whatnot. So we haven't had as much trouble with bus drivers, but vans is significant. I mean, we're paying probably almost as much in overtime as we are in regular operating costs. So it's pretty significant right now. But we hope, we just hope that we've been doing more and more outreach with, with the workforce, and again working with Mass Hire and whatnot. So we hope that gets better.
And that problem seems to be industry wide. We can't find taxi providers. The companies that do mass health work, they can't find drivers. There was a big push by HST for all of us, Gatcher and ourselves, to really make that front and center on how you could become a mass health driver and stuff like that. So it's pretty
Wage issue? What's the
barrier? I knew the answer to that.
Kind of a mystery.
I'd actually be a billionaire, but I don't. I suspect it's a lot of things. Wages, I think. My own personal opinion is I think there are a lot of people who were older that were in the workforce that COVID hit and many people died, and they said, like, I'm not going to spend my life working and then pass away just before I retire or as I retire. Like, because it seemed like that's what we used to get. We used to get a lot of shift drivers, a lot of older people, senior people. Because it was a split shift, a few hours in the morning, a few hours in the afternoon, and they're just not there anymore. So I don't know if that's part of it, that people just don't want to work as long or whatever. And the other one is wages. I mean, some of the transit authorities are really assertive and fall into New Bedford. They got an Amazon warehouse up across the street that's advertising for mechanics at $42 an hour. They're hiring it. Their top wage is $31. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out which. I mean, literally across the street. So it's really pretty tough. And again, we're all struggling. Us, Worcester, and the ones that are closer together, we're all struggling for the same employee CDL drivers and whatnot. So it's challenging.
The only thing I would ask is if you think if there's any state or federal policies or regulations that you think are too restrictive, or need to be changed. We could highlight those too in the RTP.
I think MassDOT has probably already gotten this. So we talked about this at our we have an annual fall conference, the Transit Authority Association does, and we talked about doing something different with the CDLs to make it easier to get. I mean, just for instance, the Cape and the Islands, or mainly the islands. They're really difficult out there because now you got to house them and do all these things, but they try to do a lot of their own training, but when they try to get an R&B inspector out to the islands, they schedule them 12 weeks out. And by that time, the guy probably moved on to another job. Like I'm not, can't live on the islands and not have cash coming in. So I think we talked to them about that at our conference, and there were several people from Mass Transit there that kind of heard that, and so I know and we talked about it quarterly. There's a RTC, the Transportation Council, RTA Transportation Council, and he's on he actually chairs that and sits on Secretary Tesla. So he's heard it, and I think they're trying to do what they can to try to make that simpler or easier. So it's, again, a lot of it, we could even do the training and set up like you can come here and do the testing here rather than try to find a place that that they have to do to bring the vans and buses and whatever down there or whatever. So hopefully they'll come up with a solution for that. But that would definitely be one that we would highlight as a significant need to kind of help with that CDL, so getting CDL drivers licensed and approved.
If you have anything else, feel free to send it on to us at any time that you get that information or you think about it. I had was
obviously the pandemic. We asked this question to one of the other outreach sessions we had were more, I guess, probably more roadway oriented, just comments that we had back. But the pandemic, clearly, we talked about some of this stuff has affected the transit options as well, whether it be workforce. Have the needs changed at all? What has been the effect
This is Bruno again from Mac. From our end, we are still probably at only about 60% of pre-COVID ridership, and that seems to have plateaued currently for a while. We are doing a lot of outreach. I mean, as Scott said, employers and whatnot, but we're also working internally here with marketing and our mobility manager, because we're really trying to do a lot more outreach QR codes and just really find out. From our end, clearly travel patterns have changed rather significantly, probably even pre-COVID. I mean, I think pre-COVID, a lot of the transit ridership was down 6 to 8%, give or take. Year to year, we were lucky we were at about 3 to 4%. But that's contingent. So I don't know if it's Uber, or whatever it is, it is. But clearly, travel patterns have changed, and what we really want to try to do is establish more like, because people aren't going where they were and they're not living where they used to live, and not everybody's living along the main lines on the Route 12s and whatnot. So I think what we're really trying to do is, and we'll probably highlight this in comments back to you, but we've been buying a lot smaller vehicles, RBOCs that are about a third the cost of formerly a diesel bus at about $475 to $5, these are like 160. So you can buy more of them. They're easy to maintain. They're easier to operate. So it's just all around. Because again, we don't fill the buses on most of our routes. So these are anywhere from 18 to 22 passengers, which are much lower to the ground, easy to get on and off. And so the idea is we're thinking is really try to get into more neighborhoods, so to speak. I mean, every neighborhood, but trying to get areas where there's a lot more, population centers or whatever, and if nothing else, at least get them to the fixed routes. If not, if there's some cases, maybe being able to set up kind of feeder routes or whatever, or even just routes that may be short. One thing we've been looking at a lot more is reducing our headways, and so we can increase our frequency. A lot of our routes are an hour, and you do a 5-minute errand, and you just rode an hour bus, and you do your 5-minute errand, then you're going to wait 55 minutes for your bus to come back, and then another 40-minute ride back to where you started. About a third of your day is probably gone, and nobody wants that. We're all important, and everybody's time is the same. Your hour, my hour, and the guy down the street's hour, it's all the same hour. So I think we really want to look at how we can kind of shorten transportation. I've been looking at other RTAs, and a lot of them have 20-minute routes that run between highly populated areas and strip mall or business parks or whatever. So I think we really want to try to do more of that. And again, trying to get out in the neighborhoods that are traditionally have not been served because you can't get the fixed bus out there. So I think that's one of our big things is really trying to kind of rejuvenate what transit is, because there's certainly more people that need transit just from seeing the many people walking, having to walk with bags and whatnot, and I'm just thinking we're not getting the areas they are in. So you got to go where they're living now, and we got to go where they want to go now, rather than all of our things converging somewhere near the mall that is being rehabbed, but not terribly not terribly busy down at the mall. So and I think the more we can find out what those new travel patterns are, the better off I think we're going to be.
Another thing that I've noticed in the travel patterns, Bonnie Mahoney, is just the universities, Fitchburg State University and Mount Wachusett. They're still doing a lot of online classes. A lot of them have brought back their full schedules, but they're still offering a lot of online, and a lot of their staff are still working from home. I have a couple people I know very closely who work for Fitchburg State, and they're still working from home. So, a lot of those, our Fitchburg State, the Route 4 line during the college season was the biggest ridership, and it is not even 50% of what it used to be. So I know that's a huge change in travel patterns just from that one route alone.
The other meetings we've had, our communities have talked about, they've seen the traffic volume almost back to where it was.
Oh,
I
definitely.
think it's worse.
Oh, yeah.
No. I think it's much worse.
Well, I think it's because a lot of people moved west, and so Bruno and I, we live out towards the west, Templeton, Athol, and smaller communities. Templeton, there's so many brand new houses in Templeton, and the traffic that comes along with the people who have moved west.
I think part of that was through the pandemic, sending people home to work. Now they've gotten used to it, and now they've decided, well, I don't have to go into Boston every day. I can live further and further away.
Yeah.
So there may be some more increased residential pressures on our communities too.
I do know that some of that was related to the commuter rail, because it was for a long time at 8-10% of what it was pre-COVID, and then it went to about 20 and kind of plateaued there. I do know they're saying that I don't know about further out on the line, the Fitchburg line or the Worcester line or whatever, but I know closer into Boston they're saying it's getting somewhat back to pre-pandemic levels of ridership. But out this way, the highways are. I mean, I come in from Athol. It used to be like as I leave here, every exit, for more people leaving. By the time I got up past Gardner, it was like, okay, it might be 10 of us. Now it's still like kind of this line, 2 lines of traffic, both lanes. It's and I think less people are doing the train out here and still commuting in. So yeah, it's I have to tell you about the 190 unit train. I mean, that's like I experienced that. We went up to Devon's, I think, or we went down to Stowe a while back. I'm like, I had forgotten how enjoyable that 190 unit train really is.
Yeah.
Between 3:30 and 5.
It's pushed back to 6 now.
Yeah.
Chelsea from Channel 9. I think the thing that's the most challenging about the change in traffic patterns is that just as many people need transit, but sporadically and different at different times, not like, the same time every day to get to and from the same thing. They're working 3 days a week from home and 2 days in the office, or they're going in as needed, or they're only going to do certain things like, certain kinds of appointments, or so it's like there's still just as much need, but it's really going to be hard to serve it with that's going to be a challenge, because obviously, fixed route relies on consistency, and I don't know what the ability is to shift to more micro transit on demand kinds of. I think that's really what this region needs the most.
Vicky from Sterling. I want to just pick up on what Chelsea said. Comments when I finish. I'm going to bring us back to the rural transportation issue rather than congestion for a moment. That's been kind of a hot topic me and for Sterling, it's I'm preaching to the choir, you know.
You are.
Recognize that. But if we can find some way to provide some kind of micro transit livery service, cab service, something on demand, maybe we can take care of some of the disabled people, some of the elderly, and pick up a few other people along the way. Bruno and his team were successful in getting a $250,000 grant to kind of do a pilot project with 3 communities, Sterling, Lunenburg, and Lancaster, to see if there's a way that that can all happen. Perhaps you want to.
Glad to sing in the choir with you. Bruno again from Mart. Yeah, so we actually have 2 different grants, microtransit grants. So we got one through Mass Development Finance Agency, which I had forgotten actually how those are funded. It's actually, and I saw on today because it was on Commonwealth Magazine, a little article about it. It's actually funded through, these grants are funded through money that Mass Development gets 20 cents of every Uber ride. And so the community's got a certain, so much of that and whatever. So anyways, there's a fund that Mass Development has, and so we were funded for that. It's funded to provide microtransit services in Sterling, Lancaster, and Lunenburg. And we also have another one we got through the MAPC Community Connections Program. It's we have to match that. I think it's CMAQ, Congestion Management Air Quality money. So I think it ended up being like a little over 1.3 million over 3 years. Again, roughly 20% of that would be funded by MART. And that's for Stowe, Littleton, Bolton, and Boxborough, so kind of on that eastern fringe, and these guys are on the southern fringe. And the idea is to use those grants. Again, we've got microtransit software already, and the idea is to try to somewhat build. Scott had brought to my attention. He had looked at GATRA, had done a big microtransit, and I think MAPC actually did some of the study work for them, and they developed a fairly robust now microtransit route between Plymouth, kind of their eastern edge of their service area, and kind of the greater Attleboro Taunton area. And so the idea, again, doing some of the microtransit, some of the on-demand single people, but also we just talked with Stowe about the NAPC grant, and they're really interested in setting up like shuttles to Hudson, shuttles to the Southampton train station, where you can grab more than a single person, or maybe get a lot of those single occupancy vehicles off the road. So I think more of that. And again, I think as we continue down the road of getting information from our customers and kind of redesigning the routes and maybe kind of migrating away from the larger fixed route buses, that may hopefully free up some resources, as well as hopefully we can get some new resources with the new administration coming in. To maybe try to do more of that micro transit, because I agree, Chelsea kind of hit upon a very salient point, is that travel patterns really have changed significantly. And you're right, some people are 3 day a week or 2 day a week, or they only have to go in for certain large meetings or appointments or whatever it may be. And so the traditional bus running 1 hour loops 13, 14 hours a day doesn't, you can go to, the Cape, you can go to Worcester, you can go in Pittsburgh, you see empty buses. So we really need to move away from that and do more of this, kind of micro transit where it's like, you're going, more targeting neighborhoods. CATA does that. KPN has a service like that where they, they take a main route and then they deviate, kind of a flexible, deviated fixed route. They go off there, pick up people who have kind of texted them or put into the app that, on that, whatever they are. So I think, the more we can adapt to that, I think the better chance we have of kind of reestablishing the transit operations, because, again, just the travel patterns have changed enough where fixed route buses are not the way to go. Certain areas and heavy traffic areas and, areas that you're going between heavy suburban or heavy population areas and, all, business parks and the like, but the regular transit customers that are just riding from point to point or whatever, fixed route buses are not going to be the way to serve them. So, sorry about the long answer to the short question.
That's exactly what I was hoping you were going to say. I'd like to see Mark. I did take that survey online, by the way. I'd like to see Mark is on board with the concept at least. What I'd like to see is MRPC take a leadership role in trying to promote transportation in the more rural areas. I don't know what you've done in the past, I'm not being critical about it. It's a matter of my own ignorance, but it is something that's clearly there today, and it's not going to get any better all by itself. And so, the agency, with as much muscle as you can muster, I realize that there's a pecking order here. But if we're not aggressive and assertive in the way that we approach this, it will just slip out from underneath us. And we'll be talking, some of us will be talking about this 20 years from now.
The plan is really, this is probably our biggest platform for this type of thing, is to identify some of these things in the RTP, especially the changing trends. And we do a lot of demographics in here that are clearly, show what the needs will be in the senior population and everything like that. So this is a really good place to at least, start.
I know.
RTP.
I don't know if anybody else saw the North Central Chamber of Commerce just released their report on workforce development.
Yes.
And as I was going through that, one of their sections is on transportation, and one of their suggestions is developing a North Central Transportation Management Association. And actually, I copied Sherry on an email to a smallish group of people who all said, MRPC and Sherry should start a Transportation Management Association.
But I think in terms of the hierarchy of things and the process that the state goes through, you do have a part to play, and it's an important part.
They used to, this Bruno again, so they used to be a bit of a, that used to be kind of the anathema, we didn't want TMAs around because it was kind of they were fighting for the same customers or whatever, but I did notice in that report, again, I kind of skimmed through it and we'll read it in more detail, but one of them they talked about is there were two different, maybe even three, I think it was, down in Cambridge, Somerville, and that area down near MIT, and they talked about how the T actually partnered up with whatever the name of the TMA was, and so kind of helped work with them with a little bit of funding, and the beauty about it is if you fund them, you get the ridership. So I don't really care how our ridership improves, whether they can get it for us or we get it ourselves. So I do think there's there's probably many lessons to be learned in that. We worked with Crosstown Connect down in Concord, Acton area, kind of off and on pieces, they were very helpful and kind of told we're getting such great ridership in Littleton, Westford, our new shuttle down there right after the beginning of the new year in 2020. It went from like 2 to 3 a day to about 12 to 15 a day, and a New Year's resolution or whatever it was. And then COVID hit, and we stopped because nobody rode at all. But we were working with Crosstown Connect on that, and they were helping us kind of target areas where they said, well, these people, we can't serve them because of where they're going, more in your area, but they were kind of feeding us the information and getting into Westford and areas where they were building new apartments or whatever. So there's definitely, I think that's an idea that definitely has to be explored. It's no longer us against them. It's like survival of the fittest. It's like let's pool our resources, make this work. So I'll be keenly going back through that section.
Next slide. These next two slides are like sort of some of the main points we've told our community about too. Is like what needs to change or improve. And we talked about a lot of stuff here, microtransit and TMAs and those kind of things. And the next question deals more like are there specific locations that pose an issue? So one is more, the first one's more high level look at the problems and what do you think needs to change. And this one is more, as the pinpoints show, more specific to certain locations or areas like that. Again, I don't know on the transit side if there's our specific issues. I'm sure you've got roadblocks on your routes and things.
Going back to the first slide or the last slide, one of our big things is funding always. I will say in the bipartisan infrastructure law, they did increase our funding pretty significantly, like $1 million a year over the first year, and then maybe a little more than that over the next 3 to 4 years, assuming that continues to get funded. But on the state side, we actually took a cut this year from last year, about $175,000 for us, and the bigger ones, Worcester and Springfield, I'm sure took significantly more than that for hits. And again, there needs to be a more steady stream of funding because again, we for years, and I will say during some of the more recent years, we were able to get from off of our historic $82 million mark, we got up to 87 and then up to 90. And last year, I think we hit 90.5 last year. Excuse me, 94 last year, but then this year went back to 90.5 million. And there's just no realization, I mean, especially now, the costs are everything. Our capital projects are double what they used to be. The vehicles, I mean, we had vehicles that were costing 110, went up to 160. I mean, it's just criminal, but at any rate, fuel, everything. So, I mean, from our end, I mean, we've squeezed every savings out of the system. There really needs to be more funding into the system. And, I don't know if the recent ballot question that passed maybe does some of that, or if a new administration, I just saw that, and the transition team for transportation actually has, I think, 2 administrators on it, plus the head of director or executive director of our association. So hopefully that brings some light to the fact that, and again, we don't have anything against the T. We lose millions of people around Boston, and that's all great and good. But they have a very steady stream, and whenever something's wrong in the air, they just open the checkbook, and it's 160 or 200 million, whatever you need, we'll take care of it. And I think you need to be in the realization that, I mean, the rest of us don't have full Saturday service like we do the regular rest of the week. We don't have any Sunday service. Evening service is pretty spotty. I mean, most of them end at 7 o'clock at night. So it just the realization, and the same thing with when you look at the rail. They're moving to rail, so if you're going to start that service from probably Worcester to Pittsfield, and they're looking at this northern tier study, which I fear is probably going to fall on deaf ears because it's just very difficult to start a new service like that. But at these entire areas, kind of to that location, at these entire areas that in Athol, I mean, it's like one choice for good internet, broadband, and you pay dearly for it through the only one that provides it, the cable company. So when you don't get those services, when you don't get the buses out there, when you don't get the trains out there, economically they suffer greatly because, I mean, again, you just can't do the things that you can do in areas that have better services. So I think, from our end, again, funding is one piece, and then just the specific locations are for us all the rural communities. I mean, it's just hearing the stories that we heard at that meeting with Senator Goby and a lot of these. It was actually people from MRC, some of the staff, but probably a half a dozen or so actual families that are served by them. That the stories are pretty heart wrenching. I mean, it's like you get done with college. It took them 4 or 5 years to get through college, and then they get a job that they can't get to. So they sit at home and they don't really they start to stay back with all the things they learned. Or 3 to 4 years of just sitting around because they can't get out. But many of these people, I mean, they're working families and they need to get out themselves. So it's I think for us, just the specific locations are anything once you get beyond the cities, it becomes around here rural pretty quickly, and we really need to figure out a way to to service that better. I think one thing we're trying to do is we did pitch to Senator Goby and Representative Kilcoyne and Lachlan too. So one thing we're trying to look at is what we did in the past when Congressman Malver was in office. He had brought some money in. That's what kind of started that Athol operation. But we'd also started 2 link services, the Winton and Gardner link and then the Athol Orange Gardner link. And they kind of do some of that kind of more rural transportation. I mean, Athol's not exactly rural, but when it comes through Phillipston and Templeton and whatnot, same thing with Winton and comes through Baldwinville and Templeton. We kind of pitched that as like, maybe funding something like that where, you don't go all day long. You don't do, 13, 1-hour loops or whatever. You maybe go 2 or 3 loops in the morning or 2 in the afternoon, smaller vehicles because you're not going to have that large ridership. And maybe that gets us, to be able to move more people from those communities into the city, and then they can catch the bus services and whatnot, the travel training and the like. So I think for us, the big thing around here is really trying to move towards how do we better serve the cities with vehicles getting in the neighborhood, and just really having to do a lot better job of serving the rural communities because they're just they're burgeoning with people that need to work and need to get out to appointments and healthcare and education and just they just have no way to do that. So
I'd like to hear that you reached out to Senator Goby. She represents a very rural state. She's a real champion of the people in that district.
He's extremely engaged at that meeting. She talked with all the families afterwards, kind of separately, and yeah.
As a former Syrian resident, she does what she can as well. It's nice to have somebody in the Senate and somebody in the House working in the same problem. Sometimes it makes that.
Anybody else here in the RTA coalition, RTA advocacy group that's pushing the bill? There's a bill moving through.
I think our association is. I think we have we have a regional MARTA, the Mass Association of Regional Transit Authorities, and we have an executive director, and she's got her pulse, on the pulse of everything state house. So I'm sure she's helping try to sheep her that through.
That's really their thing is funding for the RTAs and not just keeping it in Boston.
Yeah. Well, and I think again, not to point fingers or accuse. I mean, it just. I mean, there's more of them there towards the. Once you get in 495, there's just more of them, and they're just not as interested out here. It's like, one thing I will say, I think now Governor-elect Healy and many others, they're talking more about equity across the state. I mean, we're finding out once you get in 91, so this brokerage work we do for the state, that's in the Coordinated Human Service Transportation Plan. I mean, so they've now got it, so they want to do GPS tracking of the vehicles so we know where they are and on-time performance and all that. I will tell you, transit is one thing, communications another. You get beyond 91. I mean, so we kind of work with a software vendor to track cheaply. They have to download this app, and they arrive and perform when they get. So you can do it through a phone, which works pretty good until you crack 91. You get to get on 91. It's like a lot of communities out there have banned cell towers. So I mean, you get out there, it's like. I mean, that's another problem. I mean, it's communication. So and again, they're even more underserved than the areas we're in. I mean, we're talking rural. They're like remote. I mean, it's really, you get the areas out there. There's houses are 4 miles apart or whatever. So yeah. I won't beat that dead horse.
Running a little bit long, so we'll just kind of quickly. I think the next slide, we talk about what does a successful regional transit network look like in 2050. I think you cover a lot of areas that you thought you'd like to see.
We will definitely give you more comments as the whole thing progresses and surveys and whatnot. As you know, we're not shy.
And clearly, we're in a transition phase, and it's not just the pandemic. It's all these new trends that are emerging, and with everything, supply chain, like that. In terms of the plan itself, we've basically kicked off worked with our JTC, Joint Transportation Committee, and our Metropolitan Planning Organization. We've kept them in the know. We've discussed just vision statements, goals, objectives, policies, that type of thing, and we're sort of wrapping up that right now. Running a lot of things across the JTC and try to get some feedback from them. Public input, obviously, this is a productive meeting. This is the 5th one that we've had. We've been talking about doing some more as things progress a little bit further, and possibly some more venues and some audiences. So that's ongoing for the next few months at least. The analysis, really, we get into the analysis very soon here. A lot of census stuff is what we start with, and as we move through with the plan, a lot of statistics in our region. Whether it be crash statistics or just general infrastructure type of statistics that tell a story, and we can determine some future trends from. And let's see, that brings us through the spring roughly, and we'll be running a lot of this information for the NPO sometime in April or May to get a draft out there for a 21-day public comment period. I'll be in touch with Mart as well on a number of things in the next coming weeks. Specifically, first off, I think on just like the goals, objectives that we worked on 4 years ago, the transit-oriented ones. So I'll reach out to you, Bonnie and George, and whoever else. So that's kind of where we stand right now. We hope to get a endorsed plan in the summer. We're on schedule with that for the most part. It's different than the approach that we've taken in the past. As Brad mentioned, we did this last in 2019. So in some ways, it's easier for us to get some feedback now because people are more willing to do this virtual thing, and we're able to reach more people surveying. So we're in progress right now. Website, we went over this. We'll have a dedicated website to the 2024 RTP in the next few weeks or so. We'll have all the updates that are developed will be on that website.
And we'll be posting the videos too from all our workshops there too. And the other important thing is there's not a drop dead date on any of this. So as ideas come up, as plans change, your priorities change, you can just let us know at any time. Contact any of us through email or phone calls or whatever. We're not putting a hard and fast deadline. We just want to put something together that outlines, stresses your needs, what you're looking to accomplish, and what you think needs to be done in the future. So that's what we want to stress on these RTPs.
One last quick comment, just to keep in mind, is the linkages between housing and transportation as we're trying to develop more affordable housing and redevelopment, and that usually comes with a requirement that it be on a transportation with access to transportation. So when somebody's looking to develop housing, they will not take like donated property or whatever if it doesn't have access. So really what they should be doing is partnering with and doing more communication with transit providers to say, hey, we've got this donated property that we would like to develop, but it doesn't have transportation. So there needs to be a little bit more communication in the development process of those kinds of things.
Something we can incorporate into the plan. I think that's important. We have in our work program for this coming year is a housing coordination plan. I'm not sure. It'll be the first one we've done in the MRPC on the transportation side, so we have to sit down and discuss how that's going to progress. But that is an important link and part of overall regional transportation.
We'll be in contact. I know that obviously we have a good, everyone's kind of in touch with all the different things that goes on in these plans and your plans and our plans. As it relates to transportation especially, we'll be reaching out to you, pulling you into the process as much as possible.
With that, I want to thank everybody for coming, and thank you for loaning us your boardroom.
Glad to have you.
Like that, I'm like, oh,
Go way back. Yeah.
it's all coming back to me now.
Oh, you're determined.
Stop by anytime.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you all for coming. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
You might want to stop the recording.
Should I do that, Bonnie?